back on Open for Business here on EagleNewsLive.com, and we're here with Attorney Roel Refran, the Chief Operating Officer of the Philippine Stock Exchange. Thank you for coming, Attorney.
It's my pleasure, Cesar.
Okay. So, as mentioned in the introduction earlier, it's going to be an exciting afternoon because you will guide us through the ins and outs of the stock market. But before I will ask those details, Attorney, we also hear, aside from the Philippine Stock Exchange, we hear NASDAQ, we hear Dow Jones, S&P 500. What are these very important stock markets in the world that are also reported by the various media outlets?
Correct. So, when you hear of these terms, you would think that these are either stock markets or there's another concept called indices.
Okay.
In the Philippines, the stock market is the Philippine Stock Exchange, or the PSE, and the index, we call it the barometer or the benchmark index, is the PSEI.
Okay.
So in other countries, for example, there would be NASDAQ, which is a stock exchange, or let's say the SGX, Singapore Stock Exchange, but they would have an index which could be an S&P index. It could, let's say, be a Nikkei index and all that. So those are two concepts that just demonstrate that one is the company that is allowing, a stock market is really a facility by which investors can actually look for investment opportunities, and another facility by which companies, normally these are the established companies, they call it the blue chip stocks and all that.
Okay.
Established companies would offer their shares so that investors, both retail or the ordinary investor, as well as the ones with the sophisticated investment policy strategies, we call it the institutional investors like the banks, insurance companies, they would be able to interplay and buy these shares of stock being offered by the companies who need the funds. So very basic concept is the stock market allows those with funds to be able to tap companies that are in need of funds, and they course that transaction through the stock market. Very basic concept. Just like a supermarket.
Okay.
If you enter a supermarket, you realize that there are rules, there's a facility, but it's a different transaction because there are tenants who actually are the ones transacting. Same concept with the stock market. We are the facilities provider. We provide the rules, the facilities, the technology, and there are the companies and the investors who then transact.
Okay. So simply put, Attorney, if I am a regular employee and I want to get or own a certain share of a very prestigious company, I will not name that company yet, I now become a part owner of that company. Is that definition correct?
Yes, that is correct. When you buy stocks, the concept is you are buying it to become a stockholder. And being a stockholder means you are a part owner. And that's a very powerful concept. Being a part owner means if there are dividends, dividends flow out of net income. Companies on any given year, in a good year, they would realize net income. And they would set aside a part of that which they will use for expansion, working capital.
Correct.
The remainder, they will declare as dividends. You being the part owner would be entitled to dividends at the pro rata share depending on the total number of shares outstanding. That's one benefit.
Okay.
And there's three main important benefits being a part owner. Second benefit is if the company eventually becomes a bigger company, you as a part owner would have what's called increase in the value of your shares.
Okay.
Or capital appreciation. What you bought for 20 pesos, because of very good management, good opportunities, may suddenly become 22 pesos, 23, 25. It's not uncommon that you see, for example, a doubling of the value.
Correct.
Right? So
you bought it for 20 pesos, it becomes 40.
40 pesos,
okay.
some even go beyond double, right?
Wow,
So,
correct.
but that's over a period of time. It's never
Yes.
overnight.
Yes.
All of these things happen over a period of time. So that's the second important thing. And the third important thing of being a part owner is what's called the political right, when there are stockholders meetings, there are important issues to be discussed. You have one share, you have one vote. You have 10 shares, you have 10 votes. So you exercise that right to vote on important affairs such as electing the board of directors. If there, let's say, is a merger that's important, it will have to be subjected to the approval of the stockholders. So that is very empowering.
And when do you do that? Is this the one that is normally also seen on papers where there is an annual stockholders meeting?
That's correct. And companies, corporations are required on an annual basis to hold an annual stockholders meeting whereby all the stockholders are invited. Some who cannot join will submit a proxy, get a representative to vote for them. Important matters discussed in an annual stockholders meeting, especially for listed companies, the companies that are traded, whose shares are traded in the Philippine Stock Exchange, are number one, who will be our board of directors? No? Do we just extend the term?
Normally, how long is the term of?
It's just 1 year.
Oh, it's 1
1
year.
year. In
Okay.
other countries, there are terms which are longer than 1 year. So every year you decide on the fate of who will be your members of the board. And then other important matters, like I mentioned, if there's an acquisition, if there's amendments to the rights among the stockholders, these will all have to be concurred in or objected to by the stockholders. So it's a very powerful tool to become a stockholder on the political side as well as on the economic side.
On the economic side, I heard of the term you said, dividends. So when you say dividends, this can be converted to cash. So like, for example, I bought a share and at the end of, when I saw that when the company have this good news and they earned a lot, it performed profitably well and they assigned specific dividend, when can I get that cash, or can I just cash it immediately at any time that I am convenient to do that?
Okay, very important, very good question. So normally at the end of the year, after that you would have an audit for the financial statements of a company, no? And it's during that time, normally dividends declaration would happen between January or all the way up to maybe March or April. To each his own. Some companies have a regular, let's say, quarterly dividends being distributed. But I would just say, on an ordinary basis, I would say annual would be an expectation of the stockholders to be entitled to dividends, assuming there's net income that was generated by the company. If it's incurred a net loss, then I don't think that company will give out any dividends. So, assuming that there's a declaration between, let's say, January to March or April, they will declare the amount per share.
Okay, correct.
Right?
Okay.
And then they will declare also the date on which it will be paid. So you as a stockholder will expect that on that date, the amount of dividends could already be withdrawn if it's cash dividends.
I
Sometimes
see.
dividends could be stock dividends. Now, they will give you additional shares of stock.
But like, say, do you have an option? So will they tell you, okay, would you want a cash dividend or a stock dividend?
Normally, they would just declare one type of dividend.
Okay.
If it's cash, it's cash. If it's stock dividend, it's all stock dividends. No? What's more common really is cash dividends, as you mentioned. So,
Of the many publicly listed companies, which one would do it? Which is majority? The ones who are doing it quarterly in terms of declaring the dividends, or they do it annually?
it would be the annual declaration of dividends,
Okay.
number one. So, just to give you an idea, in comparison with the value of that share of stock that you own, let us say you already bought the shares of ABC company.
Okay.
You know, let's say that is listed in the stock exchange. You bought it for 10 pesos. If you generate anywhere from, let's say, 2% to 3% by way of cash dividends, that's a very good dividend-paying company already. Right? So, again, as I said, there is no benchmark. It depends on the availability of cash as well as the net income that will then be distributed to all the stockholders, common stockholders. I just like not to complicate it, Cesar, but that's everything that we've discussed will apply to a common stockholder. But there's also another share of stock, class of share of stock. It's called preferred shares.
Okay.
If you've heard of a preferred shares, there are preferred shares with a specified percentage. Some would say, let's say, for example, 6% dividends for a preferred share. For every single year that there's dividends declared, they will get the 6%, depending on the year, right? If it's a net loss year, obviously there will be no dividend. But so that's a big difference. If it's a preferred dividend, preferred shareholder, normally it specifies the interest rate or the coupon rate, but really it's a dividend rate. If it's common share, you would just have to rely on the amount that the company or through the board of directors will decide to be distributed for all stockholders.
But it's still the stockholder who will invest who has the opportunity to choose.
Of course, there will be, for some corporations, there will just be common shares that are available. For some, there would be both common and preferred. The choice is all for the stockholder.
When we get back, we will know who can buy shares in companies. Will ordinary people like us, employees or students, can easily buy stocks from the Philippine Stock Exchange? Attorney Refran will give the answer after this break. Stick with us. We're back on Open for Business here on EagleNewsLive.com. And still with me is the Chief Operating Officer of the Philippine Stock Exchange, Attorney Roel Refran. Sir, Attorney, I mentioned who can invest.
Anyone actually can invest as long as you are of age, you are 18 years old and above. So, for example, if you have a child who is not 18 years old yet and you want to have an account open in his name, the answer is you will have to be what's called the trustee.
Okay.
Right? But because it's essentially you entering into a binding agreement with the broker for that broker to actually be your representative for purposes of investing. I just have to repeat that again. If you are an investor, you need to course your investments through an accredited broker.
Okay,
Right.
which is exactly my next question. How will they buy and with whom or from
Correct.
whom?
Correct.
Okay.
So, let's say one day you realize there's mid-year bonus already given to you. And, for example, 10% of that, you feel it's something that you can invest. Right? The next question is, where do you invest?
Yes.
I would always say, Cesar, consider your risk-reward profile. What that means is, are you more the conservative type? You want that 10%, say for example, that's 10,000 pesos. You want that 10%, that 10,000 pesos, to be preserved and earn some spread or interest income on it. Then probably the suitable investment would be bonds or fixed income. These are indebtedness that are incurred by corporations or even the Republic of the Philippines. They issue bonds.
The bonds. Okay.
You have capital preservation as your goal.
Okay, capital preservation, meaning
Your 10,000,
Yes.
you want that to be still the 10,000, let's say after 2-3 years.
So preservation.
Preservation of capital, but in exchange for you parting with that 10,000, you want to earn not just for the time value of money, because the power of compounding, they say a peso now is not the same peso a year, 2 years, 3 years
That's right.
from now.
How do you describe that investor? Conservative?
Conservative.
Conservative.
So I would always say that's the conservative investor.
Okay.
Most probably he would want to invest in bonds, fixed income instruments. That's what we call
Okay.
fixed income instruments.
Okay.
But Caesar, there's the type of investor who wouldn't mind the riskier assets,
Yes.
riskier investment.
Okay.
Equities or stocks suit that type of investor who would say, I understand that with high risk comes high returns potentially, and I am that investor, then you would be most suitable for equities or stocks investment. So how do you do that?
Okay.
Take a look at the list of the accredited brokers that we have in our
Okay.
website. We have 132 of them.
Okay.
Different
132.
types. Some would have the regular service. The regular service, I mean, you would have to call them if you want to place an order. You want to buy ABC corporation shares, or you want to sell the shares that you already have, for example, of a particular listed company. We have 267 listed companies, by the way. So
Okay.
that's a long list.
Okay.
Some are the stable ones. Some are, let's say, not as big as the others, but all of them are listed companies, right? So
Going back to the stockbrokers, attorney,
right,
you said that's about
132.
132, which means that if I cannot find this stockbroker in the Philippine Stock Exchange website, it's illegitimate.
It means we do not allow them to use our facilities. Therefore, there's a lot of brokers that are actually not accredited with the Philippine Stock Exchange or not in our list of 132.
Okay.
Meaning they cannot deal in listed shares because they cannot access our technology, our systems.
Okay.
Right? So if they offer their service to you and say, I will be your broker for, let's say, ABC Corporation, which is listed in the PSE.
Okay.
If you check the website, they're not there. Please don't do any business with them.
Okay.
Because that cannot possibly be that they are offering their services when they cannot even, we did not accredit them. They're not able to access our system, right? Let's say it's in that list.
Okay.
Then that's a good start. They will ask for your...
So, like, say, for example, I saw a company there, and it sounds good. The company looks good. What's my next step?
All right. Your next step, okay, you checked it. I would always say visit their office, right? If that's always better, there's a face-to-face interaction. Because remember, you don't know this company. This is the first time that you will now meet their representatives. That's very important because normally that face-to-face interaction would be a precursor of how you will be treated as a client.
Correct.
The relationship is principal-agent. What that means is you are the boss, you're the principal,
Okay.
and the broker is just your agent.
Correct.
In exchange for which you will compensate them by way of commission income.
Okay.
Commission income, we do have, it's actually very minimal, Caesar.
Which is that's how...
0.0025
Okay.
of the amount of trade or the business that you bring to that broker, right? Because they will have to be your agent to buy or sell the listed stocks. in
It
the
may
PSE.
be small, but an agent can handle several accounts under
Yes.
his portfolio.
Yes,
Okay.
and with technology, can you imagine?
Yes.
You already magnify.
Is there a limit also to the number of accounts?
There is
in
no
his
limit. There is no
okay.
limit. And
I see.
that's a good point. Actually, now with technology, investors using their smartphones can actually open their application and look at the trades that they want to take, and they are also given access already by the broker.
I
So
see.
these are the brokers that offer online services.
Exactly.
Not all offer online services, Cesar.
Correct.
Some just offer the traditional.
Correct. So, like, say, out of the 132, some of them, an X number,
Yes.
what's the percentage?
Right
of
now,
those who can
anywhere from
online?
20 to 24
I see.
out of the 132.
I see. If you're a traditional investor, you can still, like, say, if you want a face-to-face interaction, you do that. But maybe if you're a millennial,
Right.
who's always in the mobile, you can check and without really going, because there's also an increase in the number of online transactions, right?
Yes,
Okay, my next question, attorney, is now, what will the stockbroker or the company ask from me? Are there a lot of details? Is it like buying a house and lot and a lot of things that you have to produce, a lot of government records? What
Norm-
are the requirements?
It's just like opening, I would say, similar to opening a credit card account. It's not too
Okay.
difficult, right? They just ask for 2 government-issued IDs, and then they will ask you for example, your bank account details, so that would be the account that they would use for purposes of your transaction, right? They would also ask you to execute a contract, and very important, let's make sure that we know how much they will charge for every trade that they transact on your behalf. So the time to ask that is when you have the face-to-face. Don't be ashamed or shy to ask that, because remember, you will entrust your money, hard-earned money,
Exactly.
with this corporation for which
Correct.
they will earn income or
Correct.
commission income. So ask, it's not just a one-way conversation, right? They will ask for certain documents, ask you to sign a contract, but please ask them also, how much is the commission income that you will charge me for every transaction? And also ask them, I want my monthly statement of account delivered
Okay.
via mail, the slow mail, or email.
Okay.
Or some would also have a facility by which you can download it. That's
Wow,
very important,
that's
because
very interesting.
remember, when you make a trade transaction with a broker, what's the first thing that you have to ensure? That they actually transacted it. And that will have to be confirmed via the confirmation orders in the statement of account, so that you're also protected, right? The last thing you want is that you ask them to transact and they represented that it was transacted, but lo and behold, there was no such transaction.
Which is my next question. What are my red flags? What is it that I should be very, very careful? Like, when I give you my money, it should be named after the stockbroker or the company or a person. What
Correct.
are the red flags that I should really be, I would look out for?
Correct. Let's simplify it. First is when you are talking to the representative, ask for identification.
Okay.
And if you are meeting that representative in the office, right, still ask for identification, because for all you know, he's not just a guest, or he's just a friend of an employee. That's first point, no? If you cannot produce identification, that probably is something that may be a concern to you, because you don't know if he is an authorized representative, right? So that's the first, I would say, yellow flag, not yet a
Okay.
red flag.
Okay.
Second point to consider is, as and when that representative asks you for a check, for example, or for you to deposit cash, make sure that the payee or the account would be for the corporation, right? Because the last thing you want is you're actually parting with your hard-earned money and giving it just like that to someone who will then just use it or siphon it out and not for the corporation. Remember, you're dealing with a corporation.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it's not that person whom you're going to pay. No, it's the broker. Brokers are required to be corporations. It's not a partnership. It's not a sole proprietorship. It's a juridical, we call it juridical company entity. It's a corporation. So make sure it is in the name of the corporation, right? Third very important point, you as an investor, you have the right to demand a monthly statement of account.
Okay.
And even on a more frequent basis, you can even have that, because a lot of our online brokers, you could actually get the statement of account as and when you need it in that online facility, right? So the right to a monthly statement of account is your entitlement as an investor, right? Fourth item we mentioned a while ago, as and when there are dividends, it is your right to make sure that there is timely crediting to your account. For example, they say it will be paid, the company says it will be paid by July 30, and come August, you still haven't been credited with the account. That's not good. You are entitled to get that money as and when it is paid. And in general, I would just say the fifth item is, a red flag is if you cannot contact your broker by phone or by email, because it's a service.
Correct.
It's a service, and there's 132 of them. So They always have
Can you
to,
just easily change?
Yes.
Like, oh, I don't like this
Yes.
broker, I would transfer. That's possible.
you can maintain multiple accounts with different brokers, and you could also
Okay.
close it
Interesting.
as conveniently as you opened it and transfer it to another broker.
Okay, attorney, I have a lot of questions, but I think you have to be back here at the network,
pleasure.
and let's do a series of information, education to our viewers, because it's a very interesting discussion. But before we end, I'd like to ask again one question. We always hear from the news that the Philippine Stock Exchange is going down, and also the value of the Philippine peso against the dollar is also going down, with interest rates going up,
Going
and
up.
some other things that affect the macroeconomic performance of the country. Does this mean that the ordinary investors would have to wait before everything settles down before we invest? So what's your take on that?
Yes, that's a very, very important question. They always say the time to invest is when you're ready, right? Some people would say, let's time the market. Let's see when it's at its lowest, so you buy it at its lowest. But really, Cesar, you don't know if tomorrow the market will really go down to its lowest. So, you hear of all of this. As you mentioned, interest rates will be hiked by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. The GDP growth of the Philippines is still very strong, more than 6%. However, if you look at the strength of the peso, it seems to be depreciating, right? At 53.5, when it used to be in the 40s. So, what does all of these have to do with your investments? The answer is, if you invest now, and you are an investor who is in it for the long term, really, what would matter is, on a 10-year period, how would it differ from the time you came in to the time when you feel you would need it for the education of your son who will go to graduate school and all that. The daily fluctuations or the short-term fluctuations, while it is something that you need to know, shouldn't trigger you to sell off investments that you bought. Just relax. But some people cannot take that, so they would just rather go to the fixed income product, where, as I said, capital preservation is their goal. But for the risk takers, all of these would just present opportunities. If the market is down, they see an opportunity to buy the stock so that they can have a lower cost average for their total investments portfolio. If the stock is high, it's also an opportunity. Market is at all-time highs, good time to sell and realize that gain. So on both ways, whether it's going down or going up, an investor would have to ask himself or herself, is it good for me to buy now because it's lower than when I bought it? Maybe the answer is yes, if you have spare cash. And if it's at an all-time high, remember in January, we were hitting an all-time high. A lot of people, investors, decided, I want to cash in and sell because this is an opportunity for me to realize maybe 5%, 10% gains. That's good enough for them, right? So,
And it was good because the market is now down.
correct. So
Okay.
people right now look at it as a buying opportunity. So I always say, there's always an opportunity. It's just a question of your risk tolerance and your goals. Always be mindful of that. No? Your advisors could only advise you so much. The decision will always be yours to make because you're accountable for your financial you're accountable for your future.
That is a very, very good statement from Attorney Roel Refran. I think he has to be back here at Open for Business here at EagleNewsLive.com for a series probably of information and education for our viewers. So thank you, Attorney, for coming over. We hope to see you again in the next show because we have a lot of questions. I have 2 pages here, but we only covered half of it. So Open for Business will be back here on EagleNewsLive.com. Stick with us.